So my name is Gary Kay. I'm the Chief Content Officer of In the Boombox, which is intheboombox.tv, the only website that covers tech from the baby boomers' perspective, including through the eyes of a baby boomer, sometimes diminishing. 1969, how many of you may remember 1969? Okay, 1969, I'm sitting in my apartment in Ithaca, New York. My roommate walks in carrying a gray box with a couple of connectors on it. And on the box, it says, in a Dymo label, it says NMR detector. I turned around to him, I said, what is that? And he says, that's a nuclear magnetic resonance detector, the precursor, of course, of MRI. Not wanting to sound like the only guy on the planet who didn't know what nuclear magnetic resonance was, I just nodded sagely and went on. And you know what? It wasn't really necessary, because the one thing I found in 45 years of knowing Justin is that he does a better job of explaining technology to other people than almost anybody else on the planet, which, as you may know if you've dealt with engineers, is an absolute exception. Justin went on to just an amazing career at Intel, and if I spend all the time telling you everything he's accomplished, we'll never get to him. But in short order, he is an Intel Senior Fellow. He developed the world's fastest computer, the first computer that did a teraflop. Anybody know? Do you guys know what a teraflop is? Sounds obscene, right? A teraflop is a trillion floating point operations a second, not something that I do in my spare time. And he held that speed record for 4 years. He went on to become Intel Senior Fellow, and then Intel's Chief Technology Officer and Vice President, where he has the job of supervising Intel's dozens and perhaps scores of research labs, partnerships, educational partnerships around the globe. I asked him, he ran out of fingers to count on. So with that, I figured this is a great opportunity to talk to Justin about some of the groundbreaking work that he does. He has oversight of where Intel is going in the coming generations. So I'd like you to please give a welcome to Intel's insider, Mr. Wizard, Justin Ratner. So in the last few months, we've talked a little bit about the fact that you have been working with the world's eminent astrophysicist, Dr. Stephen Hawking, who, as we all know, suffers from Lou Gehrig's disease. And you're trying to keep them moving, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. We were invited a little over a year ago to visit with Stephen in preparation for his 70th birthday celebration. They hold a special conference associated with that, which is called the State of the Universe Conference. If you're looking for a modest title, that's, I think, a pretty good one to go with. And so we had the opportunity to visit him in Cambridge, at his lab, and spend some time, with him personally, and saw for the first time, I guess, in person, the kind of technology they were using to let Stephen communicate. And if you watch, the Science Channel or the Discovery channels, he's a fairly familiar face. And what's really amazing about that fact, and the amount he's in the public eye, and the various books that he's published, is that he does that at the rate of 1 word per minute. He used to do an astonishing 5 words per minute, but the disease has advanced to the point where his ability to interact with the technology is just deteriorated. And so while we were there and while we were talking about the conference, they started to talk about, well, would it be possible for Intel to look at the challenge of getting Stephen to communicate and perhaps getting him back up to 5 words per minute or maybe 10 words per minute. And we've got some of these shots here. I guess you can see them over there. I've got them here. The interface that Stephen's been using for well over a decade is what you see here. And you'll notice off of his eyeglasses, there's a little wire. We actually dressed this up. Originally, it was a paper clip. It's gotten a little fancier. But it's called a blink sensor. And one of the things that Stephen is able to do is tweak this cheek muscle. You'll actually see it in just a moment. And what that does is it stops a cursor that's scanning the text you see in the upper right-hand corner. He's looking at the display, which is mounted on his motorized wheelchair. And so it scans, and when he wants to pick that letter, he squeezes that cheek, one of the few muscular movements he has available to him, and that stops and selects that character. You can imagine how tedious this is, but I mean, Stephen's just amazing in his ability to drive this interface. So we started talking about, well, what technologies have people tried, and they looked at eye trackers. They fitted him with a piece of headgear. I guess it looks like a swim cap that had electrodes in it. They were trying to do this with brain waves. But during the conversation, I noticed that Stephen had multiple facial expressions. And I said, oh, well, this might be the key here. If we could teach a computer to recognize these expressions, our symbol space, I don't want to sound too technical, would go from one symbol, which is the blink, that stops the cursor, to perhaps 3, 4, 5, or even more symbols. And if you think about Morse code just being 2 symbols, a dot and a dash, if we could just get 2 symbols, he could do Morse code, and that would be a great leap forward. So, so we had that exchange. I was just telling Gary anecdotally before we walked in. We went to lunch. And Stephen's personal assistant came up to me and she goes, oh, Stephen has lots of facial expressions. And I said, really? I thought I was getting the inside story, right? She says, oh, yes, I can tell when he's hungry, when he's angry, when he wants something, all of this stuff. And, when he needs his caretakers and everything. And so I said, okay, fine. I said, then we'll pursue this. And so we came back I guess, so that was in October. I think it was probably due to some of Stephen's health issues. We came back in February, and we just gathered data, and we did some video recordings. And this is Lakeisha Gunter. She's my technical assistant, and she's going to show you through a series of video exactly what we captured at that time. Okay, so here's the blink sensor. By the way, that tone is very important. That's how Stephen knows that he's successfully selected the character. And I should have prefaced all of this. I apologize, Gary. All these videos are used with Stephen's permission. We respect Stephen's privacy tremendously, and we wanted to make sure that everything we were going to show you today had Stephen's approval, and he very graciously agreed to let us show it to you. And over the past year, we've spent literally countless hours working with Stephen on developing a next-generation interface for him. Okay, so now let's look. So that's the old technology, the blink sensor. Now let's look at this collection, and we're just going to show you 3 of a number of these different facial expressions that we have now actually taught the computer using facial feature recognition technology to recognize and to translate those expressions into symbols that we can use to drive that interface. So we'll start with cheek twitch. There you go. Okay, so this is that's the same gesture he uses today. Then we'll look at eyebrows. Wow. Okay, we'll do mouth pull. Hopefully.
Signal once.
Okay, so you see the mouth pull. You want to try eyebrow raise one more time? Okay, so there's the eyebrow raise. So in fact, he does have a range of facial expressions. And what we did at that meeting last February is we recorded literally hours of video, and then took that back to our labs in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley, and then trained the facial feature recognizer to recognize those symbols. So in addition to that, we're not going to talk about it today. We haven't publicly disclosed it. We built a new interface, a character-driven interface like you saw, but in modern terms. And one of the things we did, for example, was we added a much better word predictor. So I mean, the word prediction that existed 10 or 12 years ago was really primitive. Today, Stephen just gives a couple of characters, and chances are we've predicted the correct word. So we're quite excited, and I will say Stephen's quite excited about this new technology, and we're really hopeful that this will sort of reconnect him to the world the way he has been for much of his life.
All right, Justin, what are the implications of this technology for the rest of us?
Well, I think we're beginning to reach a point with the facial feature recognition technology where we can now, imagine these kinds of applications and build them. I think, until very recently, I would say just the last 2 or 3 years, the recognition technology was a bit hit or miss, and probably wouldn't have the kind of accuracy that would satisfy, someone like Stephen, who's really trying to produce a lot of text output. And we're starting to look at other ways to use that technology. So I think you're going to see it in security applications. I think you're going to see it in some very entertaining, I can't really say more, entertaining applications where we, let's say, capture your facial expression and animate an avatar. And you can sort of think about the communication opportunities there. And I'll stop there before I'm beaten savagely by various representatives of my corporation. So.
Justin, we talk from time to time about the fact that all of us have all of these devices in our homes, and they all have chips in them, whether it's our cars, our navigators, our smartphones, our computers. And yet, most of the time, we go to these devices sort of after something happens, and they all sort of operate independently. When are we going to get to the point where all of my devices in the house sort of know what's in front of me instead of just what's behind me, and can help me get ready for my day and get ready for my trips and so on?
Well, yeah, and I think, and I've been saying this for the last few years, I think we've, smart devices have sort of been at a plateau for a period of time, let's say the last, 5 or 6 years, and sort of everybody's waiting for the next step. And I think the next step is what we call context-aware computing, where these devices really know us in a very deep sense. They know us as a friend might know us, or as a personal assistant might know us, and can begin to answer the questions that are suggested here on the graphics. I mean, how do I feel? Turns out there's been a lot of work in terms of understanding how your facial expression reflects your mood. And so, we can use that technology again to know whether you're angry or happy or whatever it might be. Just to understand your calendar and knowing where you need to be, what you're doing right now, what you're going to do next, what you're going to do tomorrow or next week or whatever it is. So we've been working on the underlying technologies for supporting that at the application level. And the notion here, I think, is pretty easy to understand. To infer our personal context, we use a combination of hard sensors, right? Like it may be a camera, it might be a temperature or pressure gauge, it might be an accelerometer, it might be the ambient audio in the environment. And then we take various soft sensors, and here you see things like calendar, your web browsing history, your social network, and we fuse these hard and soft sensors together, and we inference, we reason in a mechanical sense, right, using the computing power to understand your current context and understand what is important at that instant in time. So what you're going to find is, and we call this pervasive assistance, right? That these devices will begin to anticipate your needs. They'll prepare in advance to address the kinds of issues that we all face, literally minute by minute throughout the day. Do I need to be someplace? Do I have enough cash on me? Am I going to the airport? Did I check in? I mean, all this stuff will become second nature to these devices. And I think our, our relationship, with these devices will change. And, while we're fond of them today, we'll be emotionally connected with them in just a few years.
Oh, I'm already in love with some of my devices. Some of you know, thanks to Jody and Jeff for AARP, I've been doing some articles about how some of the consumer electronics companies are dealing with the needs of boomers and seniors. And I did some work with Intel and was quite astounded to find the level of involvement that Intel has in doing research into aging, and your whole group that Dr. Eric Dishman's whole motto of living longer lives better. Why has Intel gotten so heavily involved in research into aging? And tell us some of the things that you're doing that we may not know about.
Well, I think we see aging as part of this greater sphere of applications in personal healthcare. I mean, we really want to keep people in their homes, in the environments that they know and feel comfortable in, rather than having to put them into managed care, into institutions. And we think it's a great opportunity for technology to make that possible. I think one of the interesting things I want to mention, and Keisha was nice enough to cue this up for me, is this notion of remote healthcare monitoring, something Eric has spent a lot of his time at Intel working on, as you know, and ultimately led to this joint venture between Intel and GE Healthcare called Care Innovations. We've been looking a bit more into the future, and in particular looking at healthcare in the lesser developed parts of the world where you can't as easily see a professional. You may be in a remote village, or just not be able to afford access to healthcare. So we have an engineering team, a small group in Bangalore, India, and they operate under what we call the Frugal Engineering Charter or Frugal Innovation Charter, and we challenge them on remote health monitoring to come up with very affordable devices that could be used in countries like India or across Africa or any part of the world where healthcare is not as readily available. And this is an example of one of their experimental designs. And one of the things they wanted to do was be able to do a high-quality electrocardiogram. So the thing in the middle that looks like a smiley face is actually an ECG detector, and it's used by an individual. And you put the detector at several different points around your chest. If you've had a multi-lead ECG, EKG, if you prefer the German, you understand all those attach points. We do it in succession. This generation device, which is probably a year old now, does the equivalent of about a 6-lead ECG. We have a next generation device. I don't have a photograph of it that does the equivalent of a 12-lead ECG, so very high quality heart performance study. But the way we keep the costs down is we leverage the second generation mobile infrastructure, the cellular infrastructure. So the data that the accessory device here is collecting is moved over a Bluetooth link into the phone, and then a text message takes that data and sends it to the cloud, where inferencing technology can analyze it and say, wait a minute, there are problems with your ECG. You need to see a healthcare professional, or take your medicine. You appear not to be taking your heart medicine, things like that. They were demoing this to me, and they had a guy on a stationary bike pedaling as fast as he could. And in the middle of the pedal, his phone rings, and the message comes up, whatever you're doing, stop doing it, because they thought he was going to have a heart attack. But this technology, in fact, I think what we may see is, and I think this is the beauty of frugal innovation, the technology that's coming from the emerging parts of the world will actually have a huge effect in the developed parts of the world, because these low-cost solutions will be of great value even in the parts of the world where, let's say, healthcare is more readily available.
All right. What a difference 45 years makes. 45 years ago, you would go out and you'd worry about falling down drunk. 45 years later, and you're just worried about falling down. Yeah, you laugh, right? But now, thanks to Intel, there's going to be an app for that. Yeah. So why don't you tell us about some of the work that Trill is doing and the cane?
Well, yeah, this is work that, that was done in Ireland. Intel and the Irish government, or Irish Health Service, actually co-funded this work. And it turns out that a very accurate way to predict falls in people over the age of 65 is to understand their gait. And we developed sensors, and you can see sort of the upper rectangular image there has a sensor that's strapped to that individual's shoe, and that sensor has accelerometers that are measuring stride and footfall, force, and all that kind of stuff. And you can take that data and analyze that data and quickly determine, I think, to accuracy of like 80%, whether this person is likely to suffer a fall. And that fall could result in a broken hip or even worse. I guess Mrs. Clinton had had a fall and bumped into something on the way down and turned into a concussion. Another thing I think that's interesting is a lot of people might not be comfortable having this piece of electronics strapped to their shoe. Actually, when they tested it on me, I strapped it around my sock. It was a little more discreet. You drop your pants around it. But we're very interested in how we can bring these very sophisticated technologies and put them in devices that people use and are familiar with and comfortable with on a daily basis. And so so we came up with this notion of a digital cane, which would in fact include these gait and fall kinds of sensors. And so in a very familiar device, we'd bring this very sophisticated technology, sensing technology, wireless technology, and sort of solve the problem without changing the individual's habits and daily life.
All right. Let's move to a slightly different topic. Sure. Since the advent of personal computing, every time, well, not so much personal computing, but once we discovered the internet, every time we go out there looking for data or using an online service, we deal with passwords. And one of the aggravating things about passwords is that the more passwords you've got, the more likely you are to forget them. And then they tell you, reset it. And so you then have to go back and figure out some combination of letters and numbers you didn't use the first 27 times.
Right.
And then you're going to forget that and have to go through the process all over again. All right. Fix it. Fix it.
Okay. Well, we'll try to. Yeah, actually, I think nobody likes passwords. I've yet to meet anybody who actually thought passwords were a good idea. By the way, if I can't remember my password, I can't remember my user ID. Most people have moved to email addresses. That I do tend to remember, but passwords are still a problem. And there have been, I think, various attempts at mitigating this difficulty. But I think the approach that we're very excited about and we've spent the last several years working on actually eliminates passwords completely. And we think that's the only way out, is just to say, hey, it served us well for a couple of decades, but really we're at the point where passwords are no longer necessary, and in fact, if anything, inject more risk into the security of these systems than is reasonable. So, and I think the other thing we often overlook is actually how much time we spend entering the passwords, assuming you can remember them. Right, you find, when you're moving around the web, you land on so many pages that say, okay, well, enter another password. And, I kind of got to the point where, now I have passwords, that become increasingly stronger, right? They say you shouldn't do this. All those security people say, oh, don't do that. But I've sort of stratified it, and, because I'd never remember all of those passwords. But you just spend so much time constantly putting your credentials into these devices. So, but do we have to give up security in order to get that kind of ease of use and that kind of flexibility? The technology that has interested us, should come as no surprise, is biometrics. I mean, could we do a retinal scan a la Minority Report? Could we do fingerprinting? And in fact, fingerprints have kind of come and gone. I still actually have a laptop that has a fingerprint detector scanner. It's not very reliable. You sort of get frustrated with the thing. If you don't have it at the right angle, or if you get if your finger is greasy, or the sensor gets greasy, it all falls apart. So we're starting to look at new modalities for doing biometrics. And this is the one I showed this at the Intel Developer Forum last fall, that is based on the notion of reading the infrared image of the vein structure of your hand. So at certain IR wavelengths, your skin becomes transparent, and so we can take an image of that vein structure and use that as a biometric key to verify your identity and allow you to proceed. The particular sensor we're showing today is made by Fujitsu. It's called Palm Secure. It's basically a little camera that that looks at your palm, reads your print. If it matches everything, then you're ready to go. And we have a video of this. It's kind of sitting up there. It goes by very quickly. It goes by very quickly. So let's let it come up. You'll see the image come up, and then immediately the platform unlocks. Now, this was kind of a shortcut. We're sort of waking up the platform when it's gone into lock. But what is also happening, and it's kind of hard to see here, is that once you identify, you are successfully identified by the device, then the device securely connects you with whatever service you're after. And so the application here is a banking application. Imagine going to your bank account without ever having to stop at the home page of your bank to enter your credentials, right? This takes you right to the account. And I wish you could all play with this because it changes the web experience completely. You never think about passwords or going through these portal pages. You authenticate to the platform authenticates you to the service. You go health records, finance, whatever, you pick it, it does it. Is it safe to rely on a single modality like palm vein print? Probably not. I think in a commercial practical way, we'll probably use a couple of biometric sensors, different measurements to get the same effect.
All right, final topic, because I think that's what we've got time for. We've all grown up with the famous ad campaign, the marketing campaign, Intel Inside. But in the not too distant future, Intel inside may not mean what's inside of our computer. It may mean what's inside of our bloodstream. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Give me a little metaphor here.
Well,
So let's talk about some of the research that Intel is doing in terms of interfacing our bodies and our bloodstreams and our genes with things that are smart.
Let me rephrase. I sound like Perry Mason here. I think at the stage we're at, we're just trying to successfully bring the world of hardware together with the world of wetware, right? And these are just, I think, the early attempts at doing it. What's shown here on the slide is something we call a peptide array. About 6 months ago, working with Stanford University, we used the peptide array, built at Intel, to help them with their medical research at Stanford. Highly successful projects, and now we're beginning to think about how the peptide array could be used in a variety of not research applications, but clinical applications. I was surprised to learn that there are 30 different kinds of arthritis. So when you go to the doctor and you say, it hurts when I do that, and after he says, well, don't do that, you say, he says, you've got arthritis. What he doesn't tell you is which of the 30 kinds you've got, and a peptide array can actually tell you precisely what kind you have. And you can also do, use it for cancer, for diabetes. It may be the case, may be the key to early detection of lupus. Lupus is very difficult to diagnose disease. Sometimes several years are required to confirm a lupus diagnosis. Peptide array can do that essentially instantly. So that's the first step. I think immediately beyond that, and we're starting to see some of the early commercial products. We want to bring that biosensing technology at the chip level directly in contact with the big molecules, particularly DNA, and ultimately be able to make a genome sequencing something that your doctor can do in his office. It'll probably take about a half a day to do. We estimate it would take about 2 billion sensors on one chip and a little drop of blood containing DNA to do it. But I think that's, that's something we can think about in the next 5 years, maybe less.
Right. I think we're about out of time. I would like to thank Justin Ratner and Lakeisha Gunter, who ran everything. And thank you all.